Hello everybody and welcome back to part 3 of this cool little sculpting project I got going on. I'm making here a 9-eyed slug. This is going to be a completely posable sculpture, as the clay that I'm using is a new clay coming out this fall called Cosclay. It's the fantastic flexible plastic, and it'll allow it to be completely posable when finished. Like I said, it's not out until this fall, so you have to wait until then, but in the meantime, you can follow this channel and get a head start on understanding it. And don't forget to leave some suggestions on how I can test this clay. I'm open for suggestions. But anyhow, without further ado, let's get started. In the last video, I left you with just this body part that I did in Super Sculpey. I pre-baked it in the oven at 275 degrees for 1 hour to kind of simplify the baking. In this video, I'm going to be covering all these little appendages right here with Cosclay and hopefully finishing this out. Okay, to start things off, I basically rolled out a sheet of Cosclay at the thinnest setting, and I'm using my self-centering ruler to cut me, equal sheets, and I'm using the roller itself as a guide. But before I get started, I need to bend all these outer eyes out of the way gently. Don't bend them too much. This is to help me get to the center part. And I just put the clay on there vertically instead of, coiling it or something. I figured this would be the most stable way to do it. But I put it on there vertically, and I just wrap it around the whole length of the armature wire. This is probably not the easiest way to do it, but for me, I think it was the most stable way, because I imagine coiling it would cause it to split. If you notice, it left a little opening at the end where it didn't quite, fill it up. So I just added a little tiny snake to that part. It kind of flares out a bit, but I like that. Also making sure to cover the two metal parts coming out of the bead from both sides. That has to remain hidden. Cut the excess off. Kind of flatten the snake down onto the eye a bit so it doesn't stand out too far. Then I begin carefully removing the seam by blending, which I eventually do for the last tiny snake I just put on. Now for the second antennae. I won't be showing the third antenna because it's exactly the same thing, and likewise, I'll only be showing the first outer eye as well for the same reason. Close up the gap at the end with another tiny snake. Then lastly, one more tiny snake to cover the metal wire coming out from both sides of the eye. Okay, right here in the center of the innermost 3 antennae, I insert a cone-shaped piece of clay, pointy end facing down, allowing it to fit within the 3 antennae. Next, I'll add a tiny piece of clay on any of the sides that might appear shallow. Then using this tool, I'll work that piece down onto the core piece and both antennae. The goal here is to reduce any air pockets. Here on this side, it's not very shallow, so I'll just add a small sheet of clay covering the same 3 parts, the core and the 2 antennae. I do the same thing for the final side of this newly formed triangular shaped structure, completing what now concludes the 3 innermost antennae. Adding a thin sheet of clay to all the sides is a cool trick to help clean things up in appearance. I'm just using the thinnest setting of the pasta machine to do this. And lastly, bending back up one of the outer wires close to where it originally was. These all wind up being slightly spread out further than how the bare armature appeared before starting, by the way. I do exactly what you see me do with the inner 3. It's also what I do with the remaining outer antennae. But there's no need seeing me do the same thing 6 more times. So moving on. Okay, I have all my antenna eyeballs covered in clay. Now I'm just going to take pieces of clay, and just like I did with the center, try to do that down here. I found using tiny snakes works well for this part. Just drape it over the base of the appendage so I can then work it on gently with my tool. Like before, I'm not worried about how nice it looks at this point. My only goal is to work it down on there with as few air bubbles as possible. I got a cool trick I'll do later on to make it look better. I'm also not worried about the very bottom of this knuckle either. I have a really cool technique that I like to call Reese's Peanut Butter Cup that'll cover the bottom area quite brilliantly. That's coming up shortly. But right now, I'm just working all the way around this knuckle, doing pretty much the same thing for each antennae. Adding just a tiny snake around the base of each of these appendages did the trick well enough, which was to join them in such a way that made sense. So let's skip ahead the last few antennae since it's exactly the same thing, shall we? Okay, now for the cool part. I have here a strip of clay rolled out to the thickest setting of the POS machine, and I carefully wrap this around the whole knuckle, all the way around it. Then I carefully cut the excess away, and join the two ends of the strips together using just my fingers. Now tell me that doesn't look like a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. Still using my thumbs, I then work first the top of the strip down onto the knuckle, being sure it fully bonds with it. And of course, I'm always avoiding air bubbles. Then I do the bottom of the strip. This was much easier than the top because it was less wavy. Meow lets tool this piece onto the knuckle, making it look as if it was always there, or natural. I'm actually being very gentle with the clay right now, not using too much force to move it. I think this is the best for merging two pieces together without changing the overall look of either piece. You gotta be gentle. I like the look of the bottom of this, so I want to keep it that way, with the exception of some minor texturing perhaps. By the way, the next video will be some minor texturing and painting. I might even be airbrushing this thing. So look forward to that. Anyhow, I use this same gentle tooling and rubbing approach to work my way all the way around this knuckle. It's a little slow, but being careful usually is. Okay, remember earlier when I said I had a cool trick to even out roughly tooled clay? This is it right here. All I'm doing is using a dry nylon brush. Definitely don't use a brush made with hair, because it'll come out all onto the clay and create a mess for you. But I'm just pressing straight down into the clay, or stabbing it so to speak, working rapidly and moving it all around. This is like magic and will even out the clay, removing most tooling. I think it's a pretty cool trick to remove tooling work anyways. Okay, now we're going to reskin the bottom half of this slug using a sheet rolled out to setting 4 on the POS machine. That's roughly half the max thickness. But first I want to add a little bit of this translucent liquid sculpey, or TLS. This is to ensure the raw clay bonds properly to the previously baked clay. I don't need a whole lot of it, just enough to make it sticky. With that done, now I can lay down my sheet of clay, making sure it's centered properly and big enough to cover it all the way around before continuing. But before working it on there, I want to pull the end of the sheet back down by the knuckle because I decided to add a little clay up at the top of the neck area. This is just to reduce the sharp angle a bit where the knuckle flares out. I thought this would help it look a little better. Look how nicely this clay smooths. With that all done, I can now begin working this down onto the slug's body. I try to use the paintbrush whenever possible. 2 reasons for that. 1, it's a lot more gentle and won't smush the clay. 2, it won't leave any fingerprints. Also, I chose this medium thickness, setting 4, to allow for some texturing in the next video. I thought that a decent thickness to hold some texturing. Now that this front edge has revealed itself to me, I can cut that excess clay off, like so. Then it's right back to working the rest of the sheet on. I try to work in such a way as to not create air pockets, and once I get to the outer edge and can see it well enough, I can make a cut there too, You know it's time to cut when all the contours have been revealed. If you try cutting prior to this, it could make the clay a little short, not fully covering the sculpture. Once cut, using the same paintbrush technique, I can then remove some of the sharpness of that cut. Okay, now let's blend this sheet onto the knuckle now that this side is done. And I do the other side exactly the same way. Look how nicely this Cosclay smooths. It really does smooth nicely. Okay, we made it to the last part of this video. Yay! I'm first adding what I thought was a small amount of TLS, but it was a little too soupy, so I had to wipe it back off with a shop towel. Then I added a small piece of clay to help balance this out a bit. It didn't seem very symmetrical to me, so this helped a little, I think. Now it's ready for a sheet of clay. Same thickness as the last part. Once again, this will enable me to add some texturing in the next video. I do hope to see you there. But that's it for this video, guys. I thank you for taking the time to watch this. It sure means a lot. Let me know what you think in the comments below about how all this went. Did you like it? Any feedback? I appreciate just hearing from you guys in general. It does mean a lot. If you're new to this channel, I'd ask that you please subscribe and hit the bell button, that way you don't miss any new content. I'm going to be testing this Cosclay even further. It's new, it's coming this fall, so have an edge when it comes out and know all about it by following this channel. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. It sure means a lot, and until next time, I will see you here again soon. Thank you so much for watching.